I'm Patricia, and this is Investigating Vegan Life with Patricia Kathleen. This series features interviews and conversations I conduct with experts from food and fashion to tech and agriculture, from medicine and science to health and humanitarian arenas. Our inquiry is an effort to examine the variety of industries and lifestyle tenets in the world of vegan life. To that end, we will cover topics that have revealed themselves as common and integral when exploring veganism. The dialogue captured here is part of our ongoing effort to host transparent and honest rhetoric for those of you who, like myself, find great value in hearing the expertise and opinions of individuals who have dedicated their work and lives to their ideals. You can find information about myself and my podcast at patriciakathleen.com. Welcome to Investigating Vegan Life. Now let's start the conversation. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I am your host, Patricia, and today I am sitting down with Carolyn Scott-Hamilton. She is the founder of the Healthy Voyager. You can find it at healthyvoyager.com. Welcome, Carolyn.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Absolutely. I'm excited to get into everything that you're doing. And for everyone listening, I'll read a bio on Carolyn. But before I do that, I always offer our audience a quick roadmap of where I intend to have some of my inquiries go throughout the podcast. And today we'll be looking at a brief history on Carolyn's academic and professional life as it pertains to her vegan endeavors and plant-based endeavors. That will include some of her accomplishments, such as her cookbook and some of her other business endeavors, and also her personal history and her rhetoric as it plays out with vegan living or plant-based lifestyles, things of that nature. And then we'll also look at other businesses that Carolyn has. She has an entire brand associated with the Healthy Voyager. We'll wrap everything up with kind of the ethos of what the embodiment of her brand and her lifestyle is, as well as ways that anyone can contact her and get involved with what she's doing. A quick bio on Carolyn before we get into all of those things. The Healthy Voyager, aka Carolyn Scott-Hamilton, is the creator and host of the Healthy Voyager web series, site, and overall brand. An award-winning healthy, special diet and green living and travel expert, holistic nutritionist, plant-based vegan chef, best-selling cookbook author, media spokesperson, sought-after speaker, consultant, and television personality, Carolyn Scott-Hamilton is a respected figure in the world of healthy lifestyle and travel, as well as special diet cooking and nutrition. The Healthy Voyager aims to help people live well, one veggie at a time. So, Carolyn, you've got such a prolific past and history, and right now, so many different endeavors that you're working on. But I'm hoping before we get started with all of that, you can draw us kind of a story or a narrative of what your academic past and professional history prior to where you came to right now looked like.
Well, I always say that when I moved to Los Angeles, ever since I got here to now, I've lived 9 lives. I came out here for kind of what most people come out here for the industry. It's been a part of my life the entire time, but I've segued and gone off path and off tangents so many times. But somehow it all kind of still ties in. So I went to college at the University of Miami for undergrad. I actually was on the medical school track, and I wanted to be a pediatric surgeon. And I remember one Christmas break, I was talking to a doctor. I was actually working at a dentist office, and my dentist and I were chatting, and he was like, the medical field isn't what it used to be, and all kinds of things. And I never had any doubts about what I wanted to do, but that conversation did kind of bring something up for me that I thought, well, wow, you know what? If this is something that I really, really want to do, it's going to be years before I'm actually done.
Yeah.
So I would have had medical school, then residency, and then specialty and fellowship. I would have been in school for like 15 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought, well, what if after all of that schooling, I don't like it? Or I thought, well, what if I want to have a family and I'm never going to have the time to enjoy them because I'll be on call. It all started to kind of come up for me. And I thought, well, if I'm having these doubts now, then maybe I should walk away from it. And I was on full scholarship, so I had a couple of years left. And to my mother's chagrin, I said, okay, I'm not not going to medical school.
Uh-huh.
And I said, I'm gonna go to film school. And she was not happy with me, but my father was, because he was the creative.
Mhm.
And I had actually been, since I was 5 years old, actually since I was 3, I had been dancing, and since I was 5, I'd been acting. So I'd been writing my whole life, and singing. So I kind of went back to my creative roots, and I was like, I'm going to do this. And it kind of was no skin off my teeth, because I didn't have to pay. If I had to pay for school to do that, I probably wouldn't have made such a bold choice.
Mhm.
But I did, because I really thought, you know what? I've always been creative. I've always wanted to do things in a different way. And when I remember speaking to that dentist that day at work, and he did say, he's like, you don't really get to do things the way you want to do them anymore. And I thought, wow, if I can't practice medicine the way I want to, then
Mhm.
maybe this isn't for me. Um, and it all worked out, because once I got to LA, I came out here. I didn't know anybody. Right after undergrad, I got out here, packed up my Dodge Neon, and pulled a tiny little U-Haul cross country through a hurricane. And I got here, and my life has been pretty insane in a cool way, I'd say. I was working in the industry for a while. I was acting, and I was singing, and I realized a few years in that it wasn't how I imagined it. I did pretty well growing up in Florida, but the scene out here is quite different. And excuse me, I didn't love it anymore, because I didn't
Mhm.
get to be creative. I didn't like the business side of it, and I didn't like the, how do I say, just the kind of the myopic view about things in the
Mhm.
business. As far as, it wasn't so much based on talent; it really was based on looks, and not so much good looks. It just very much type, very type. I'm Latina, but I don't necessarily look Latina to casting directors.
Mhm.
So I started to see a pattern, and I was like, this is just an uphill battle, and I don't even love doing this anymore. And I said, I'm out. And I ended up falling into PR. I was working with a woman, and we launched now pretty successful yoga clothing line. And I learned invaluable information and skills from launching that brand. I learned
Mhm.
about PR, and launching a line, and the clothing world, and all of that. And I ended up leaving there and going to a PR firm, and then I ended up starting my own PR firm. And
Oh,
from
wow.
that, yeah, so I thought, I'm just going to do it myself and do it for clients that can't necessarily pay a 2,500 to $5,000 retainer fee. I want to help the little guy. So I did. So I was doing PR and events. So I did everything from lifestyle PR for clients, to weddings, to wrap parties, to fashion shows. And that was my life for quite a while. But before that, probably within the first few months that I moved to LA, because of the whole looks and being in the industry, I had read a book called Fit for Life, and it was about food combining, because of course I got here and I thought, oh my gosh, I got to be really skinny.
Mhm.
So, 22-year-old me was thinking kind of a little bit on the shallow side, but it was a book that changed my life. And because it was about food combining, about combining your carbs and your proteins, again, 22-year-old me thought, oh, well, I'd rather eat carbs than proteins. And I
Mhm.
ended up going vegan, plant-based, pretty much overnight, without really knowing much about it. Just that I wanted to lose weight, or, some ridiculous reason. But it resonated with me so much that I started to really research it. And because I wanted to do it for health reasons and do it correctly, I learned to love it.
Mhm.
I ended up getting my master's in holistic nutrition, and I started my PhD in naturopathic medicine. And I thought, wow, I'm so glad I left medical school, because this makes so much more sense to me.
Yeah.
And because at the time, back in '98, there was there was nothing. I didn't know any vegans. There wasn't even a Whole Foods yet. There were, small little markets, and everything was very hippy dippy in that space. So I was one of the only people that I knew that was eating that way and living that lifestyle. And I kind of got tired of eating bowls of guacamole and cucumber sandwiches and
Yeah.
salads. I thought there's got to be more to life than this. So I ended up going to culinary school because I always loved cooking, but I wanted to see what else was out there as far as swaps and figuring out how to eat, in this new lifestyle. But I did all of that for my own knowledge, not necessarily to become a chef at a restaurant or open a restaurant or anything like that. I did do some private nutrition counseling for clients, but I knew that wasn't my passion either. So really, I just loved having that knowledge base behind me. So cut to, I have my PR firm, and I'm doing quite a bit of travel. And because of my dietary restrictions, I was always figuring out ways to manipulate menus. I'd like to say MacGyver cook in my hotel room. I always
Mm-hmm.
had snacks, and I thought, hey, I can't be the only person that's going through this. Not necessarily that there are other vegans out there, but anyone with a dietary restriction, be they diabetic or want to
Yeah.
eat low fat or whatever the case may be, there are a lot of dietary issues out there that keep people from traveling. And I've been traveling since I was a kid. I was born in Colombia. I'm Colombian, and I've been all over the world. And I thought, hey, this could be a resource for people. So I started pitching the idea for a show around to networks back in 2005 for my show, The Healthy Voyager. And it was a little too early in the space. They all
Mm-hmm.
loved it, but they were way too afraid to take a risk on anything health related. I had a major network say, we love the idea, but we don't do healthy. And I thought, well, that, that's the whole point.
Right.
We need to have options, because at the time, the most popular travel shows were either eating bugs in the Amazon with
Mm-hmm.
somebody or eating like a 50-pound burger. And I was like, well, that might be entertaining to watch, but for the consumer and the viewer, this doesn't help them. No one's actively going to travel just to look for these things.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, you know what, I'm going to launch it on my own, because I was a publicist and because I had the film background. I created the show on my own, and I launched it on YouTube. And because I couldn't necessarily travel all the time, I started a little companion blog to do some write-ups about places and even local places. And then I started to post my recipes. And
So what
now
was that original show about? Was it a catch-all? Was it just you discussing, you interviewing people, you talking about new places to eat? Like, what was the Healthy Voyager, that first original YouTube series, about?
it was a travel show. So I would travel to places, and I would go to vegan restaurants or find vegan food at specific restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very, very niche. Now I still have the travel show, but it's more adventure based, sustainability based. I do talk about food in some restaurants, but I found that content isn't evergreen because restaurants close, restaurants
Mm-hmm.
change. So some of those old episodes that are still up, it's funny, like none of the restaurants exist.
Right.
um, so I thought, and because I started traveling more and getting sponsored more and working with big brands, I was able to put together a much more well-rounded show. So I do some really cool things now. It really is more adventure-based, culture-based. There's still that culinary aspect, but not in the sense of promoting specific restaurants, because again, they come and go. So yeah, so I still have the show. And then within all this time, I had a cooking show. I've launched all kinds of little businesses under the umbrella of the Healthy Voyager. But yeah, that the little idea that came from pitching to networks is now my full-time job. This week, it's 15 years old, for at least from the idea, when the germ of the idea when I had it was 2005, and now it's my full-time gig, and I love it.
Absolutely. So what was kind of your first turning break when you started making, you said you started garnering sponsorships and you were developing all of these projects. You have a cookbook out. What is the name of your cookbook? Is it
The Healthy Voyager's Global Kitchen.
there it is. And so when did that come out?
That came out December of 2011. So next year, I can't believe it'll be 10 years. I'm going to release a 10-year anniversary edition and add some more recipes and kind of update it. But yeah.
Did you have sponsorships prior to that, or did they kind of come and go? And do you find, given that you have the PR backing, are people approaching you? When was that like career turn? You know, there are a lot of people that have been in industries and they're like, at some point, people started approaching me.
Yeah, that started to happen earlier than I had expected. But because I started the brand way before social media even existed, there was no
Hmm.
Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram, there was nothing. I was kind of screaming into a vacuum. I didn't know who my audience was, but I was building an email list because that was the only way that I could basically chat with my audience and fans or anyone that had any questions. So I started a newsletter, and that was my way to keep in contact with people. And then as social media started to grow, I was always an early adopter, so I was able to kind of jump on the bandwagon each time a new platform popped up on the ground floor. So, but I think I was able to get ahead of the game because I was around before that started. So early on, because yes, I was a publicist, I was pitching myself to brands, and I was kind of teaching them the new way to
Hmm.
market their product or service before influencers were even a thing. um,
Hmm.
because they were using all of their marketing budgets for traditional media, so print media, TV media, spots, things like that. And I was saying, hey, for a fraction of that cost, I can create this content for you. I have X amount of eyeballs and viewers and that sort of thing. So I was able to work with brands and kind of teach them a new way of thinking. And then as social media started to pop up, more people started to come to me. And then now there are social media agencies that wrangle all the brands and then come to me. So it started off early on with me pitching, and then people started to find me, and then social media blew up, and now it's me kind of being able to say, oh, I'm not going to work with that brand or this brand. But yeah, it's been a pretty neat evolution, seeing it from its infancy, where there was no way to talk to people outside of the traditional pitching, and now it's just crazy.
Well, in hindsight's beautiful too, because you can see that like winding road, which at the time is usually just kind of seeming chaotic, I think.
Hmm.
I'm curious with, because you know you've dropped into a little bit about the fact that you moved to LA. It was a very external physical environment, that made you health conscious, or at least look towards this the Fit for Life book. But
Hmm.
I'm wondering after that, and how you would define your vegan life now. What attributes do you tie into it, and also what is the differentiation that you make between the terms vegan and plant based?
Yeah. Well, starting off with that, I say vegan just because it's easier. I prefer plant based, because I went plant based for health purposes. Uh, I solely talk about it from a health perspective and a dietary perspective, what I'm consuming.
Hmm.
Whereas vegan is the catch-all for people who live the lifestyle that have no animal products whatsoever. So how they eat, how they dress, the products they use. And that tends to be people who are more on the animal rights side of veganism. I still identify with that because I do love animals. I don't wear animal products. I don't use any cosmetics or beauty products or anything household products that contain any animal products. But that's only because after I realized that I wasn't just doing myself a favor eating plant-based, that I was helping the environment and helping the animals. That's when I started to realize, oh, I can live this holistic lifestyle that helps everything, not just me. But I still, my number one reason for having done it is for health reasons. So that's why I tend to use plant-based, because unfortunately vegan tends to have a knee-jerk reaction for most people that is negative. And
Hmm.
I understand why. I mean, I find that any extreme lifestyle has their loud mouths that kind of ruin it for everybody else, you know.
Uh-huh.
So you know, be it veganism, be it CrossFit, be whatever it is, anyone that's evangelical about something tends to kind of leave a bad taste in other people's mouths that are like, oh, that's, you know, crazy and cultish, you know. So I get it. I understand the passion behind the hardcore vegans, but I have always led by example. I've never been negative. I've never been preachy. And in fact, I have been able to persuade people to become vegan probably more than most vegans that I can think of, because I've just said, hey, look, I live my life. I travel the world. I hang out with people that are not vegan. None of my friends, very few of my friends are actually vegan. So I've always been very inclusive.
Hmm.
So I feel that that's why I like the word plant-based, because it just sounds so much nicer and approachable, because unfortunately the word vegan is a bit of a turnoff, even though now, again, with the hindsight, I would have never imagined how insanely popular it has become. um,
Right. Well, and even more so over the past, I thought it was kind of gaining traction, and then things like um, game changers and certain things have come out that have sent people into, the plant-based interest that probably would
mhm.
never have been there throughout the
Yeah.
next three generations. And why people come over and how it's defined. I think that for a long time, companies were turning to the term plant-based to, like you say, kind of avoid the stigma.
Hmm.
However, I've spoken to a couple of vegan restaurant owners and things like that, particularly overseas, over the past couple of months. And a lot of them are a little disgruntled because people are using the term plant based to include things and items and products, even in stores that are not vegan. And so
Mm,
they're kind of attaching, plant-based has become this new like fortified, like vitamin
buzzword.
D
Hmm.
fortified. Yeah. And it's this concept of saying something healthy without it being healthy, which if a lot of the documentaries and information systems coming out will show you is that that's actually the form of manipulation to the downfall of a product. When you start fortifying
Absolutely.
something with vitamins, you start actually depleting it of what was originally good for it. And so people saying plant-based and kind of taking over that term, there's a lot of fear that it will become molested to the point where it no longer even identifies with being plant-based or vegan. And so I'm wondering, as a
Absolutely.
cookbook author, do you you must care a great deal about ingredients and
Hmm.
what's going in and really identifying. But do you think that the term plant-based has become manipulated, or do you think it's still like a strong avenue for people to trust that it's meaning something? I mean, I think people are identifying it as something that is more healthy, fewer ingredients,
I yeah,
fewer additives.
I agree, because I remember when everyone started jumping on the natural bandwagon.
Mm-hmm.
Anything can be labeled natural because there's no regulation.
Right.
So as long as there's water in the product, they can label it as natural. So it really is misleading for the consumer, and unfortunately so. I actually heard that organic will now be unregulated, so people can use that and mislead customers. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I think it is unfortunate that the word plant-based, because I do think that it sounds nicer. I think it is kind of all encompassing, but just because it's plant-based doesn't mean it's vegan, but if it's vegan, it is always plant-based, right? So
Yeah.
I think people just need to be discerning when they're reading labels and what they're getting. But it is unfortunate that people will take something that's good and use it to manipulate the consumer, unfortunately. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
I
I
want to
still
get
really
back
love it.
to, yeah, I do too. I like the term, and I hope it stays pure. I hope we get some regulatory measures in mind as well, because having something plant-based that you turn around and has like yellow number 3 in it feels deceptive for some reason. I want to get back to something you mentioned about the cookbook. You talked about, or early on in just kind of the starting off the ethos of your career, you talked about really caring about dietary restrictions and turning to this vegan way of living and things like that. It really opened you up to people who weren't just vegan, but people who had all kinds of dietary restrictions, which now is kind of a really big deal for, people who are lactose intolerant or people
Mm-hmm.
who have a gluten intolerance and things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature. And I'm wondering if, as you go about constructing the cookbook, I know it's almost a decade over now, but do you pay special attention because your original focus was dietary restrictions? When you go to combine, or as a chef, when you go to make things like that, do you specifically ask yourself, looking at a dish, like, what can I exclude or include to make sure that those people with restrictions are included in a certain number of meals? Or is that a consideration that you have?
Yeah, actually, when I wrote the book, I had that exact thing in mind where I wanted it to be inclusive for as many people as possible.
Hmm.
So each recipe has an option for gluten free, low sodium, low sugar. So I actually should send you a copy of the book. But there's a little key with little icons, and it's at the top of each page. And then there are asterisks at the bottom for the swaps if you want to make this dish specific for
Nice.
a special diet. So I thought of that early on because I didn't want it, again, because I always wanted to be inclusive, not just vegan. And I actually remember fighting with my publisher because they wanted me, it says right under the heading, right under the title, it says 150 plant-based recipes from around the world. And I fought them on the word plant-based versus vegan. Because again, my scope was always casting a wider net and being more mainstream versus niche. And I think that's why I've been able to, I was always more mainstream. I never started in the vegan world and jumped the river. I was always
Hmm.
on the other side of the river and figured, well, the vegans will find me anyway. For me, it was much more important to be inclusive of everyone else and showcase this alternative as an actual alternative, not anything that needs to be black and white, not that you have to completely go vegan or anything like that. I wanted it to be an option for people and to be approachable, to not turn anyone away. So I'm glad that I won that battle,
Yeah,
but I
absolutely.
did want it to be very inclusive. And all the recipes that I make on my site as well, I try to offer. There are some that are kind of difficult to do a certain way, but for I would say a good 85% of my recipes can be made to suit any special diet.
Yeah. And substitutions, I think, are key. I mean, I really feel, and I've been vegan, for over 7 years now, and so I definitely am a little bit more sage in that. But I think that
Hmm.
the first thing that people think is you must live off breads, and then the
Hmm.
second I tell them that I'm gluten free, they think you don't eat anything. But actually,
Right.
I think every cuisine, and I want to get into this on your site. You kind of get into like a hint towards this, but every cuisine all over the world can be altered,
Hmm.
and made to be, whether it's vegan or gluten free. And there's actually a lot of freedom once you start to just understand the ingredients of that land, like what they, I just got back from Fiji, and all of my friends said, did you starve? And I said, no, they have cassava, which is like this
Hmm.
healthy friend of the potato, which I think potatoes are healthy anyway, but many people here don't. They
Hmm.
consider them as starch and things like that. But um, cassava is this even healthier big sister of a potato, and they
Mhm.
had all of these. They have long beans, which are green beans. Anyway, once you kind of, and it actually changes your relationship with traveling. As a vegan,
Mm.
actually cooking and things like that, and going places and having these conversations, which become education. Introducing the concept of
Mhm.
veganism to a Fijian is fascinating. It's a fun time
Yeah.
because they'll say, okay, so you don't eat any of that, but do you eat fish? I mean, you climb through
Yeah.
almost every single category. And so I want to turn to that with you, just because I think your website, especially as a Voyager, as the site is called, the Healthy Voyager, um, I want to get into your experience with traveling and what determines what bits and pieces you include in the site, and therefore your overall brand, and how do you kind of curate all of it? Can you climb us through, first of all, what the site is intended to do, and kind of explain to your viewer?
Sure. Yeah. It's definitely a resource for people and not just people wanting to go on culinary trips. It's geared towards travel destinations around the world. And I showcase hotels, sustainable activities and services, obviously restaurants, tips, um, and then I have the recipes, and then I also post lifestyle, healthy articles, things like that. I used to do product reviews, but I kind of got away from that just because so many people do that, and I kind of feel like I wanted to narrow it back down to boil it down to the core of what I'm interested in, which is of course travel and food. Um, but as far as curating, I travel all the time for work, so it really depends. I cover every place that I go, and some of the times I'm traveling because I'm working with a tourism board, or I'm working with a cruise line, or I'm working with a local CVB. So it really just depends, which I also love because it's never the same thing. Every trip is completely different. Sometimes it's solo travel, sometimes it's a solo press trip, sometimes I'm with a group of media. Sometimes I get to bring somebody with me. So it's all very different. And every destination has been quite different in the way that the itineraries have been set, whether it's by me or in tandem with the tourism board or them setting it up for me entirely. So the scope is always different, but I try to find the most interesting things. I do like to cover some of the I would say maybe generic things for those travelers who are looking for that. But then I will showcase something that is off the beaten path or a hidden gem. I like a mix and match of that because not everyone, I was actually speaking with someone yesterday about this. Not everyone is super adventurous.
Hmm.
I tend to take quite a few risks, and I like some crazy adventures, and the more exotic and kooky and less touristy a place is, the more I like it.
Hmm.
But that's not true for everyone. So I like to be able to be of service to everyone and showcase something for every person, uh, because everyone has different tastes and needs when it comes to travel. Um, but one of the things I've really loved to do, and this has happened more and more over the past few years, is do things with locals. Recently, well, not too recent, but I was in Finland and I was in the Arctic Circle in this little town called Rovaniemi, and it was late summer and it was absolutely gorgeous. And I met this woman who shows how traditional Laplandish lifestyle was and how she's keeping it
Hmm.
alive. And she hosts these really cool classes. She does these really cool art projects and brings people into her home. So she and I went foraging in the forest behind her house and picked lingonberries, then went back to her house and made a vegan lingonberry pie. So for me, that
Wow.
was just an incredible experience. And for her, again, like you were saying, to explain being vegan to someone who lives
Hmm.
off the land in Finland like that is like, what are you talking about? But when we finished the pie, she's like, wow, this is really delicious. And it doesn't taste any different than the one that we would have normally made. So it's so fun to be able to share my knowledge and lifestyle with somebody who wouldn't normally, and then vice versa. So I've found that to be the the most special thing that's coming out of what I'm doing now, as the show and my brand has evolved.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that it's true. I think that those kinds of interactions and growth opportunities. When I first became vegan, even the opportunity to call ahead when I was making reservations towards restaurants that required it and things like that, and then opening up a dialogue with chefs and things was just an opportunity, to have them reevaluate their craft. Most restaurants with chefs that, where you take reservations and things of that nature, like they care, they're artists and
Mhm.
they're scientists, they're craft makers, and they really want to explore some of those things. And so I've had really good experiences. Everyone's had bad anytime you come across an exclusionary lifestyle, but I've had some really beautiful opportunities as well. And I think that anytime there's an opportunity to open up a dialogue between an industry and an individual or two individuals, it's going to be a good thing. So I always, I try to push those stories more, when people get a little bit nervous. And the day has come and gone for being nervous about a plant-based or vegan lifestyle, because
Oh yeah.
if anyone has turned on any kind of social, that's where all of us, and most definitely our great grandchildren, are headed. We cannot sustain the meat and
Yeah.
dairy industry. So it's not me, it's
No.
mathematics. Like, this is not my belief anymore. Like, they've pushed the numbers. So
Yeah.
it's
Coming to
interesting.
light every day.
Absolutely. So if someone wanted to work with you, or get your advice or get your consulting
Mhm.
expertise, the best way to contact you, is it through healthyvoyager.com?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If I can share my email, it's Carolyn at healthyvoyager.com.
Perfect.
And I help people in all sorts of ways, from nutritional counseling to personal branding. In fact, right now with our current situation, I've been setting up a new website just for my consulting, because I just have it kind of as a page on healthyvoyager.com, and it tends to be buried by all the other content.
Mhm.
But I'm launching a website that's just going to be for consulting and coaching and all the different things that I can help people with, from personal PR for business PR, um, menu recipe development, health and wellness. So because of my 9 lives, I have quite a bit of information that I can help people in their transitions in life, or setting up new businesses, entrepreneurs, anything like that. So I've decided to make that a separate thing from Healthy Voyager. And yeah, hopefully I'll have that coming soon.
Absolutely. For everyone listening, you can reach out to her as these things come about. I'm sure that they'll update it on her website. I want to say thank you so much, Carolyn, for speaking with me today. I know it's a crazy time period, and I know you're really busy, and I appreciate you taking the time to lend us your wisdom.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And for everyone else listening, you can contact her one more time. We've been speaking with Carolyn Scott-Hamilton at it's Carolyn at healthyvoyager.com. Her website is healthyvoyager.com. And until we speak again next time, stay safe and eat clean. Sancha. Conversation.